Russell Peters has been honing his act since he hit the stand-up circuit at the age of 19, with side gigs as a DJ supplementing his income along the way. And when YouTube users caught wind of his act in 2004, it thrust him into the spotlight. Peters consistently lands in the Forbes top 10 list of money-generating comedians. And now he's expanding his reach with a new TV comedy series.
You know, when you think about the world we live in now and social media everywhere and people watching shows on their phones 24/7, did that factor into how you thought about how this show should look ultimately, you know?
I wasn't that involved with how the show should look because it was my first foray into that world, so who am I to come in and go, it should look like this? I don't know what it should look like. I'm gonna leave it up to you guys that know what it should look like, and then I'll tell you if I don't think that looks right yet. And so it was a very collaborative effort.
If we look at the evolution of your career, I've heard you say many times before, without the internet or without YouTube, all of this would be kind of like a non-starter in the first place. Maybe you can give us the backstory on how that all came about.
So I started doing stand-up in '89 here in Toronto, Young and Eglinton at Yuck Yucks. And I was just a road comic. And I was a road comic who was given a couple of nice opportunities. My first special was on CBC in 1995. It was on a series they did called Comics. And that was a mix of stand-up and sketches. And then my next special was '97. It was called Show Me the Funny. It was Comedy Now. And then my next big break didn't come until 2003. It was 6 years later when I did my second Comedy Now, or AKA my third special. And that's the one that set me on the course that we're on now. And it was, you gotta understand that I had 6 years to get that act together. And that's why people are like, wow, that was so great. I'm like, yeah, I had 6 years to hone this act. 6 years with, at that time, I had 8 years of experience. So by the time it came around, I was 14 years deep into stand-up. So there was a lot of factors that made that act as tight as it was. And then subsequently, you have to write a new set every 2 years now, or every year even, depending on what you're doing. So, you know, it's been a fun journey because, you know, as much as you have to write faster, you have to be more prolific. Just because you're writing fast doesn't mean you can just write crap. You have to write, you have to keep it at a certain standard. So, you know, the pressure's on, but that's the fun part of it, you know, the challenge of it all. You know, if you don't want the challenge, then you'll probably give up what you got.
And putting in the work is important too. I mean, you think about successful businesses; those don't generally happen overnight. It's a long road.
Oh, yeah,
I've heard you
very
say
much.
many times before.
Yeah,
if you want to make it in this industry, come talk to me after you've put in 6 or 10 years.
Yeah, I say 10 minimum. 10 is your incubation time, and then after that is when you start really learning about who and what you are. There's a lot of kids that come into it right now, and the younger generation they're hard working to a certain point. They're easily disheartened. And, you know, this game's about heart. You gotta have, you know, I never had my eye on, it's gotta be where I'm at now. That wasn't even my realm of thinking. I was just like, as long as I make my money every weekend, and I'm happy doing this. And you know, that's where I'm at. I'm still like that. I still love doing this. You know, I can go make millions of dollars, but you don't actually see the money hit your hands. You only read the numbers somewhere else. And I get more excited when they give me my per diem. It'll be like $150 in cash. And they're like, here's $150 in cash. I'm like, this is amazing. I just got 150 bucks. And they're like, hey, Russell, there's somebody on the phone with a huge money offer. I'm like, that's cool, but I just got 150 bucks, dude. This is, it's about the tangible for me.
And you do say no a lot when it comes to things like corporate gigs. I've heard you many times before you say,
Yeah.
I'm an artist first, and if I'm going to have to do anything that's going to toy with that,
Yeah.
I don't want that, even though there's some big offers that are coming in.
They offer you stupid money for these corporate gigs. Like, I'm talking like really, really dumb amounts of money. And I decline them quite frequently because I don't want to feel like I was bought. You know what I mean? I don't want to feel like they're purchased for the evening. And the corporate world is a very different way of thinking than my way of looking at life. And I find that I keep it real. I look at things the real way. I say things the way you would normally say something to yourself. And people in that work environment or that corporate world aren't allowed to think like a normal person. You have to filter everything, and I'm a very no-filter kind of guy.
There's a little corporate world thinking within your team, because we know the backstory of you and your brother coming into the fold.
Yeah.
Maybe you can talk a little bit about how you guys had this 1-2 power punch to.
Well, my brother's very corporate minded, so sometimes he'll post something on my Instagram because he has the access, and then I'll text him like, "Yo, what are you doing, dude? It just looks like a paid." Like I need to add my touch to it in order for people to know that I posted this. So the other day he posted something, and I was like, I was going to post that, and I was planning on putting it in my words, so I had to go in and edit it and add something to it. But like, he'll do things like he'll tag everybody in it, but when you don't need to do it that way, you can just tag the picture, and it'll tag everybody without you having to put this long at so and so, at so and so, at so and so. And I see him over there sighing right now. And then he'll be like, "Oh, you're supposed to say this." And I'm like, "I know I'm supposed to in your world, but I say it the way I say it." "Oh, you shouldn't say that." I'm like, "Well, that's your world. Let's not make our worlds mix like that."
But this is important stuff. I mean, it means that your brand is important, and you have probably more control over your brand today than any other point in the history of being a professional comic. Because you call a lot of the shots. These are your live shows, which are a huge financial opportunity for you in terms of how you distribute the content, whether it's cutting a deal with Netflix or, I don't know, putting something online down the road, and pay for, I mean, you're in control a lot of the times.
Ultimately, you're in control, yeah. And you have to decide what's right for you and what's best for you. And, I got to be in charge of my brand, yes. But at the same time, I got to keep my brand. And sometimes people too corporate minded will be like, "Don't do that, it's bad for the brand." I'm like, "You're missing the point of my brand at that point." As far as I'm concerned, I'm always focused on being me and being a comic. The brand part goes to the corporate side of people. Let the people who think like that take care of that. And they'll advise me, maybe you shouldn't, and if I agree with them, I'll agree with them, and if I don't think that's the right way, then I will let them know that too.
So you made a reference to the fact that things are moving really quickly, especially I think with services like Netflix today.
Right.
It feels like there's probably more exposure to comics through those kind of vehicles than ever before, but we binge on this stuff. So as we're talking about binging scripted shows, but for a comic, is that like, whoa, everything's, they want the new stuff really, really quickly?
Yeah, I mean, they're not really, I mean, they're making these huge money deals now with people. And knowing what they've paid me in the past, I'm like, I feel like you owe me a check, Netflix. I created your genre. I was the first straight to Netflix stand-up special. My Notorious special was the first exclusive Netflix special. And subsequently, they've been giving out 20, 40, 60, $100 million deals. And I'm like, well, I feel like I've been shortchanged somewhere along the way.
So at this point in your career, having the success that you've had, looking at the ways by which you could go about investing the money you've been able to make. I mean, I know you have had the opportunity to buy homes, but I don't know if you're like Ellen DeGeneres and wanting to become, somebody who's in and out of real estate, like a massive business. Are there things that you would like to do that you haven't done yet?
There's plenty I'd like to do. I would like to get smarter with my money and have, not so much a financial advisor give me advice, because they do that for their own gain, which is fair. But I would like to ask, like, you know, people like Mark Cuban, like, hey, Mark, I want to talk to you for a second. And, you know, I know Mark, not well enough to call him, but when we see each other, we, you know, we say, hey, Russell, how you doing? Good, you know, we've done a movie together and stuff like. He's a really cool guy. But I would like to be able to call on people like that and be like, hey, can you give me some insight as to what you think I should do or what moves I should make? Because these guys are, I look at them all as independently wealthy, and they did it themselves. They weren't these guys that went to. They just did it, and those are the kind of people I respect because they understand what it's like to earn.